Победы над Reichstagом! Знамя победы над Рейхстагом водружено! Приказ товарища Сталина выполнен!
These images from the German capital capturing the moment when the Red Army's battle flag was raised over the Reichstag in May 1945 were seen around the world. The victory over fascism was celebrated by everyone, but it came at a terrible cost: millions of lives. This triumph was achieved through the incredible sacrifices of the Soviet people from all the republics of the USSR. Soviet soldiers displayed extraordinary bravery and selflessness, risking their lives as they liberated every inch of land, every city, and every village from the grip of fascism. The same courage was evident during the capture of Berlin, particularly on April 30, 1945, when Rakhimzhan Koshkarbayev and Grigory Bulatov raised the flag on the Reichstag's facade. Koshkarbayev later recalled the moment.
I never imagined I'd survive. As we closed in on the Reichstag, those final 150 meters just in case, I unfurled a corner of the flag and wrote down our unit number, 674th Rifle Regiment, along with our names, Bulatov and Koshkarbayev. Grisha, sitting next to me, said, "Good thinking, comrade lieutenant. If we're killed, at least people will know who we were and where we came from." But I told him, "No, Grisha, we don't have time to die. We can't die. We have to get this red assault flag to the Reichstag, no matter what. And we need to be the first to do it."
The sight of the red flag flying over the Reichstag breathed new life into the exhausted soldiers, spurring them on with renewed vigor. By dawn, the Reichstag was entirely in their hands.
Cipher number 59225. At 2:25 p.m. on April 30th, 1945, our forces took control of the Reichstag area. The Soviet flag now flies over the Reichstag, hoisted by Junior Lieutenant Koshkarbayev, commander of the reconnaissance platoon, and reconnaissance soldier Bulatov. Reported by Lieutenant Colonel Plehodanov, commander of the 674th Rifle Regiment.
On May 3, 1945, Koshkarbayev and Bulatov were put forward for the high title of Heroes of the Soviet Union. Their commendation papers, endorsed by the commanders of the 674th Regiment and the 150th Division, received final approval from Marshal Zhukov. However, neither Koshkarbayev nor Bulatov ever received the high title of hero. Stalin personally intervened to deny their nominations, and the commendation papers were dismissed with this exact reasoning. Furthermore, Koshkarbayev's and Bulatov's names were erased from history, replaced with others, Yegorov and Kantaria, who also raised the flag over the Reichstag, though much later. For decades, both during the Soviet era and long after, the true story remained concealed. Today we'll uncover why our compatriots' heroism was overlooked and reveal who Rakhimzhan Koshkarbayev truly was. The phrase "enemy of the people" was a chilling and shameful term that Rakhimzhan first encountered at the age of 13, when his father was arrested based on a false denunciation. His father, the head of the family, was sent to Siberia for hard labor under the notorious Article 58. Rakhimzhan and his little sister Saulia were left orphaned, as their mother had died earlier. The hunger and disease ravaging the steppes claimed many lives. Son of an enemy of the people, his classmates whispered behind his back, keeping their distance. The teachers meanwhile turned a blind eye, ignoring him and never calling on him in class. In the end, his sister was taken in by relatives, while Rakhimzhan was placed in an orphanage. Rakhimzhan missed his parents deeply and longed for their warmth and care, but even in the tough conditions of the orphanage, his heart remained compassionate. He quickly adapted to the strict discipline and order, excelled in his studies, and became known for his integrity and bravery. I think his time in the orphanage played a crucial role in shaping him. He once mentioned that he learned Russian better than ethnic Russian children, which greatly benefited him later, especially as he became a scout. Plus, the tough upbringing in the orphanage instilled a survival instinct in him. All these factors, combined with his unique qualities and circumstances, contributed to his exceptional journey and the way things turned out. After completing 7 grades at the Taitubie orphanage, he, along with his peers, went on to a vocational school, a system set up throughout the Soviet Union at the time. These schools trained students to become skilled tradespeople. Koshkarbayev not only distinguished himself in his work, but also in creative endeavors, eagerly participating in amateur performances.
Сегодня в 4 часа утра, без всякого объявления войны, германские вооруженные силы атаковали границы Советского Союза.
He finished his vocational training in the summer of 1941 and went back to his hometown in mid-June, eager to reunite with his sister, bring her along, and start a new chapter together. But the German invasion upended all his plans. Looking at the stories of our war heroes, we see that many were the children of so-called enemies of the people, like Aliya Moldagulova, Manshuk Mametova, Rakhimzhan Koshkarbayev, and others. They didn't fight and sacrifice their lives for Stalin or the communist regime. Instead, they fought for their homeland and to clear the names of their fathers from the shame and false accusations they faced. In a way, they sought to atone for a guilt that was not truly theirs with their own blood.
They needed to prove to themselves that they were true patriots of their country. Despite the injustice done to their parents, they felt they had to show that they were not outcasts and that they belonged. There was an undeniable surge of patriotism and national pride. When some people today argue that this wasn't our war, I always counter that such views are misguided. Even beyond the fact that we were part of a united country, educated people in the Soviet Union understood well what fascism was in the 1930s and 1940s. There was a firm belief that fighting against fascism was the right course. Despite the flaws of Soviet power and the suffering endured by the Kazakh people, the conviction that the struggle against fascism was just and necessary, this belief was definitely there.
He submitted requests twice, demanding to be sent to the front lines. Finally, his request was granted, and he was assigned to the 367th Rifle Regiment near Kokshetau. This unit was responsible for training new recruits, mostly Kyrgyz, Uzbeks, Turkmens, and Tajiks, who spoke little or no Russian. Among them, Koshkarbayev stood out for his knowledge and preparedness, which earned him a position as an instructor. Koshkarbayev was then sent to Bishkek, where an infantry training school was located, staffed by experienced officers. They taught young soldiers how to operate military equipment and execute complex maneuvers. Special expectations were placed on Koshkarbayev from the start. After all, he was a former orphanage resident, a vocational school graduate, and an athlete, an ideal background on paper. No one knew about his father's fate. Incidentally, it was during his time in Bishkek that his father managed to find him. He looked into his father's familiar eyes, hardly able to believe it was real. He had long assumed his father was dead, given that not a single letter or word had ever reached him. That day, as he listened to his father's story, Rakhimzhan learned the truth about his lineage. His grandfather, Kudaykul, was a prominent and wealthy man, and his father, Koshkarbayev, had been condemned for concealing his noble origins. The betrayal came from those he considered close, villagers who had written the denunciation against him. If being associated with me brings you any trouble, you can walk away with a clear conscience. I'll understand and won't take offense, his father said. But Rakhimzhan was far from that. In fact, as he volunteered for the war, he was fully aware that he had to achieve something remarkable, something to honor his father's name.
He has mastered the training program and demonstrating strong organizational skills and determination during his internship, earning high marks. He is disciplined, physically fit and resilient during operations. He approaches his duties with diligence, actively participates in the unit's Komsomol activities. He is sociable with fellow cadets and popular among them. He has the potential to be a commanding officer of a drill platoon.
With such a commendation, Koshkarbayev graduated from the academy and was assigned to the 150th Rifle Division. There he took on the role of commander of the reconnaissance platoon in the 674th Rifle Regiment. Rakhimzhan quickly made his mark on the front lines. His platoon was always at the forefront, first to scout ahead, gather critical intelligence, and cross the Bug River. They secured the safe passage of the battalion by launching a fierce assault on the enemy. For this exemplary performance, Koshkarbayev was awarded his first honor, the Order of the Red Star. He earned the respect of both soldiers and commanders. The command often entrusted Koshkarbayev's platoon with the toughest assignments, confident in their ability to deliver. Here's a brief excerpt from his recommendation.
On April the 16th, 1945, during the expansion of the bridgehead on the left bank of the Oder River near Gross Neuendorf, Comrade Koshkarbayev was part of an assault battalion. Despite fierce enemy resistance, he led his platoon to storm the enemy trenches, being the first to break through. The fighting was intense, with the struggle in the trenches turning into hand-to-hand combat. When a grenade blew apart his submachine gun, Koshkarbayev grabbed a grenade and charged at the machine gun position. He took out an enemy crew, seized their weapon and opened fire with it. Thanks to his remarkable courage and determination, Koshkarbayev successfully completed his mission.
For his heroic actions, Rakhimzhan Koshkarbayev, who led a rifle platoon in the 674th Rifle Regiment of the 150th Rifle Division, was honored with the Order of the Patriotic War First Class.
From the very beginning, when he first took command of his platoon and fought in battles, including those in Eastern Germany, he stood out as a fearless and highly proactive leader. This was consistently highlighted in all the reports. Even before the assault on Berlin, Koshkarbayev was noted in several reports as a brave, daring and bold commander with remarkable initiative. His selection to lead the platoon in raising the flag was likely a direct result of these commendable qualities.
The capture of Berlin was not only a crucial military achievement but also held political significance. President Franklin D. Roosevelt commented on this.
We have to take Berlin. The Soviets can handle the area to the east. but Berlin itself should be seized by the United States.
In a secret telegram to Roosevelt, dated April 1, 1945, Winston Churchill wrote,
"There is no doubt that the Russian armies will take all of Austria and enter Vienna. But if they also capture Berlin, they might come to believe they've made a decisive contribution to our shared victory. Therefore, politically speaking, we should push as far east into Germany as we can. If Berlin is within our grasp, we should definitely seize it."
As Roosevelt was composing his response to Churchill, the Soviet army began its final, bloodiest offensive, the assault on Berlin.
Весной 1945 года, когда окончательно был решен вопрос,
In the spring of 1945, as the future of Germany was being decided, the Soviet Union and its allies faced a crucial question.
перед такой дилеммой, кто же возьмет Берлин?
Who would capture Berlin? Soviet forces had advanced to within 60 kilometers of the city from the east, while the Allies had reached the Elbe River.
Главнокомандующий армией союзников генерал Дуайт Эйзенхауэр,
General Dwight Eisenhower, the Allied Supreme Commander and future US President, assessed the potential losses, over 100,000 soldiers, and chose not to assault Berlin.
Сталин торопился. Он жаждал
Stalin, on the other hand, was eager for the prestige of being the undisputed conqueror of Berlin and pressured his commanders, including Zhukov, Konev and Rokossovsky, to push forward.
По данным только советских историков, существуют разноречивые сведения по этому.
Soviet historians offer conflicting accounts, but the most reliable sources estimate that over 350,000 Soviet soldiers and officers were either killed or wounded in the battle for Berlin.
Советских солдат и офицеров, считая убитых и раненых. Вы представляете, они прошагали пол Европы.
They had marched across much of Europe and were so close to their goal. The question remains, was the cost of the assault on Berlin in terms of human lives truly justified?
Вот в чем вопрос.
Понятно, что с военной точки зрения, с сугубо военной точки зрения, да?
From a purely military standpoint, raising the flag over the Reichstag didn't carry much strategic weight. The Reichstag was just a German parliament building, not the Reich Chancellery, where real governance occurred, nor was it the bunker where Hitler was actually leading from. By April 30th, when these events were unfolding, organized resistance in Berlin had virtually collapsed, with only scattered pockets of resistance remaining and communication between them largely severed. Yet the act of raising the flag had tremendous symbolic significance.
Водружение флага имело очень большое символическое значение.
For the Soviet Union and its people, it was a powerful way to signal the war's conclusion and celebrate their victory. Given that the Reichstag was a prominent and symbolic building located in the heart of Berlin, the idea was to place the red flag, the symbolic flag of victory, on the Reichstag to represent this triumph.
On April 29, 1945, the 674th Rifle Regiment crossed the Spree River in Berlin. After breaking through the enemy's defenses, they reached the area around the Reichstag near Royal Square. The fighting was intense and the Red Army soldiers were showing signs of exhaustion. Their strength was almost spent. Koshkarbayev's battalion, having pushed the Germans out of the Himmler house, ended up on the opposite side of the square from the Reichstag. At this crucial moment, it was imperative to raise the flag over the Reichstag, no matter the cost. This would inspire the troops and bolster their determination. In the 1980 documentary, Soldier of Victory, witnesses recount how the events unfolded.
Комбат вызвал, говорит, вот Рейхстаг надо. Товарищ лейтенант, рекомендует вас. Вот мой заместитель по политчасти, старший лейтенант Васильченко.
He is the Reichstag lieutenant. They're suggesting you take it, they told me. The battalion commander had warned me. It wasn't an order. If I didn't want to go, they could send someone else. I later understood why he said that. It meant there was no guarantee of coming back alive. The first from our battalion to reach and set foot on the Reichstag were Rakhimzhan Koshkarbayev's platoon. Koshkarbayev and Grigory Bulatov were the ones who raised the red flag on its columns. I quickly informed the corps commander, Perevertkin, who then reported it directly to the top commander. In fact, he reported it to both the commander and Zhukov at the same time. From the combat report to Lieutenant General Perevertkin, commander of the 79th Rifle Corps. After the artillery barrage, the assault on the Reichstag began at 1 p.m. On April the 30th, 1945, at 2:25 p.m., 6 scouts made their way into the Reichstag from the northern side of the west facade to plant the flag on the building. Lieutenant Koshkarbayev, commander of the reconnaissance platoon of the 1st Rifle Battalion, and reconnaissance soldier Bulatov successfully raised the regimental flag. Their report was signed by Major General Shatilov, commander of the 150th Rifle Idritskaya Division, and Colonel Dyachkov, the division's chief of staff. Out of the 38 of us who went into the Reichstag, only 12 from my platoon survived. I will never forget the bravery of my comrades as long as I live.
Чтобы устанавливать истину, подлинную историю водружения Знамени Победы, мне 10 лет назад удалось получить из центрального...
To uncover the true story behind the raising of the victory banner, I managed to obtain 6 undeniable archival documents from the Central State Archive of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation 10 years ago. These documents meticulously record the event, down to the exact minute.
Хочу также подчеркнуть, мы не собираемся возвысить своих, принизить других.
It's important to clarify that we're not trying to elevate some at the expense of others. We deeply respect the lives and heroism of every Soviet soldier, as they are our fathers and grandfathers. Our goal is to establish the truth for both the present and future generations, based solely on these irrefutable records. Here's the first document, titled A 2-page description of the battle for the Reichstag.
Командиром 674-го стрелкового полка полковником Plehodanovom.
I'll quote it for you. Signed by Colonel Plehodanov, commander of the 674th Rifle Regiment. It states,
И разведчик взвода полковой разведки красноармеец Bulatov,
Lieutenant Koshkarbayev, commander of the reconnaissance platoon of the 1st Rifle Battalion, and reconnaissance soldier Bulatov raised the flag over the Reichstag at 2:30 p.m. It's concise and to the point. While this document alone could be sufficient, we'll present additional records.
Ежедневно заполнялся так называемый журнал боевых действий.
During the war, a daily combat action journal was maintained. Here's an excerpt from this journal. On page 28 of the historical archive, it says, Lieutenant Koshkarbayev and soldier Bulatov were the first to crawl up with the regiment's red flag, and at 2:35 p.m. on April the 30th, they planted it on the landing of the main central entrance of the Reichstag from the west side.
Водрузили его на площадке лестницы главного центрального входа в Reichstag с западной стороны.
The exact location of the flag raising is clearly detailed on the landing of the main entrance under heavy enemy fire.
На площадке лестницы главного центрального входа в Reichstag. Это под палящим сквозным огнем. Давайте для пущей убедительности приведем и третий документ.
For further confirmation, let's look at the third document. Each division kept a historical record during the war. Here's the historical form for the 150th Rifle Division, which notes: at 2:25 p.m. on April the 30th, Lieutenant Koshkarbayev and soldier Bulatov were the first to crawl to the central part of the building and place the red flag.
As you can see, the fact that Koshkarbayev and Bulatov were the first to raise the regiment's flag on the Reichstag is thoroughly backed by both eyewitness accounts and numerous documents. So why throughout the Soviet era was this not known? Why were high honors awarded to others? And why do history books about the war list entirely different names?
Они не получили, потому что это
They were not recognized because it contradicted to the official line, which mandated that only Kantaria and Yegorov should be highlighted as the heroes.
А героев не может быть много. И поэтому, чтобы
The narrative didn't allow for multiple heroes, so the true ones were effectively erased from history to make way for others.
других людей. Их вообще дезавуировали в данном случае из истории. Просто убрали из истории. Конечно, это... Кому это выгодно?
As Roman law asks, who benefits? It was Stalin.
Кому выгодно?
He made sure the story featured a Georgian and a Russian, sidelining any additional heroes.
Чтобы был грузин и русский.
А что было дальше? Как развивалось событие? Действия Koshkarbayeva и Bulatov.
So what happened next? How did the events unfold? Commander Shatilov of the 150th Infantry Division witnessed Koshkarbayev and Bulatov's actions.
Тот, в свою очередь, командарму Кузнецову, командарм Кузнецов докладывает Жукову.
At 14:30, he reported the flag raising to Corps Commander Perevertkin, who then passed the information to Army Commander Kuznetsov. Kuznetsov informed Zhukov, and on the same day, April the 30th, Zhukov signed his famous Order No. 6.
Войска 3-й ударной армии генерал-полковника Кузнецова, продолжая наступление.
The order included 4 points, and the second one stated: the troops of the 3rd Shock Army, under Colonel General Kuznetsov, broke through the enemy's defenses, captured the main building of the Reichstag, and today, April the 30th, 1945, at 14:25, hoisted our Soviet flag.
Называем маршалом Победы, уже сей факт зафиксирован в виде приказа.
Even the order from the commander of the First Belarusian Front, who would later be known as the Marshal of Victory, recorded this event officially. As soon as the order was issued, the political department of the First Belarusian Front quickly spread the news to all media outlets, which reached the Soviet Information Bureau. The absurdity of the later falsifications becomes clear when we see that on April the 30th, Levitan, with his iconic voice, announced to the Soviet Union and the world, by evening the troops of the First Belarusian Front had seized the Reichstag and, at 14 o'clock, raised the victory banner. So, while Zhukov was signing the order and Levitan was broadcasting the news, a stage portrayal of the flag raising was already being prepared.
А вот здесь вот включается как раз идеология Советского Союза.
This is where Soviet ideology comes into play. The higher-ups were unhappy with the personal backgrounds and details of the individuals who performed the heroic act. So they decided to stage it again for the official record. It had to be done by people with the right backgrounds and ethnicities.
Вечером 30 апреля, когда Рейхстаг полностью был очищен от немцев, начинаются вот так называемые постановочные спектакли.
On the evening of the April the 30th, after the Reichstag had been entirely cleared of German forces, a staged event was orchestrated by Colonel Zinchenko. He brought in Yegorov and Kantaria, handed them the red flag and directed them to raise it on the roof of the Reichstag.
Это было 12:30 ночью 30 по полуночи 1, можно сказать, мая.
This took place around 12:30 a.m. on May the 1st. Yet another issue arose. Yegorov and Kantaria returned after 20 minutes, saying they couldn't find their roof access.
Они говорят, мы не нашли выхода на крышу. И тогда уже Зинченко поручает лейтенанту Бересту, украинцу богатырского телосложения.
Zinchenko, frustrated, then assigned Lieutenant Berest, a burly Ukrainian, to lead them to the roof. Berest, along with a group of armed soldiers, practically carried them to the top, where the flag was hoisted near the equestrian statue at the Reichstag's entrance. Zinchenko remained displeased because the statue was just a minor part of the building, and by then the dome of the Reichstag had been completely destroyed. At 3 a.m., he ordered the flag to be moved to the Reichstag metal framework. The underlying motive for this falsification was clear. It was about pleasing the leader. Stalin would favor having the victory banner raised by a Russian soldier named Yegorov and a Georgian named Kantaria, his fellow countrymen. It sounded symbolic and politically correct. On the other hand, a Kazakh like Koshkarbayev or a soldier like Bulatov or even a Ukrainian like Berest didn't fit the narrative.
Поэтому они двигали первую версию, оттуда и началось все последующие.
Hence, the initial version was pushed forward, leading to further manipulations. The strategist plan worked, and for years Soviet textbooks, encyclopedias and official histories
Во всех советских энциклопедиях и даже официальной историографии Великой Отечественной войны
acknowledged only Yegorov and Kantaria as the flag bearers of the victory banner.
Егоровым и Кантарией.
Rakhimzhan Koshkarbayev was not one to seek out awards or titles. He didn't chase after recognition in high offices, but rather enjoyed a quiet, fulfilling life. He got married and had a daughter. His wife, Rakhilya Yakhina, complemented him perfectly. She was a smart, beautiful woman with a strong will, firm principles, and a challenging past. Like Rakhimzhan, she was the daughter of enemies of the people and grew up in an orphanage. My mother spent over 40 years working at the Agricultural Institute, now known as the Agrarian University, in the crop production department. Her father, who was the prosecutor of Akmola region, was repressed in 1937, sent to St. Helena Island, and executed. My mother became an orphan because her mother died during childbirth. She used to tell me that her father remarried, but the second family didn't accept her, so she ended up in an orphanage. It was this shared experience of a difficult parentless childhood that brought my parents together. Both had been labeled as children of enemies of the people. Despite their difficult childhoods and the war years, Rakhilya and Rakhimzhan were full of life. They cherished every day and hour, enjoyed the company of friends, hosted gatherings, and loved long dinners filled with songs and heartfelt conversations that would last until dawn.
As for friends,
the door of our apartment on Lenin 42, now Dostik 42, was always open. Day or night, the table was always set. People would drop by from the street, knowing where Koshkarbayev lived. The table would be laid again without anyone asking who they were or where they came from. They'd sleep wherever they could, just like in any Kazakh home. Sometimes my father would even give up his own bed for older guests and sleep on the floor himself. It was just how things were back then. They would walk around town without any escort. Even Bolzhan Mamushale would come by our house. He lived on Komsomolskaya, now Dostik, and they would stroll along Terenkur, chatting and greeting everyone, even members of the Politburo. It was all perfectly normal at that time. Some might say it's just nostalgia, but there was a kind of nobility and a genuine simplicity in those days. And simplicity comes with wisdom, experience, and all that life has thrown at you. People were proud just to be alive, to enjoy each day.
Я думаю, что именно эта черта отцовского характера, она...
I think it was just this very aspect of my father's character that shaped the way he lived after the war, with dignity and a kind of quiet brilliance. It takes a certain kind of person to live like that, to come out of everything he endured without ever getting the recognition he deserved. He never received the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, although many of his friends, including Bolzhan Mamushale, Gabit Musrepov, and others, made several attempts to right this wrong and secure the well-deserved title for him. All efforts ultimately fell short.
In this regard, Rakhimzhan Koshkarbayev displayed remarkable psychological resilience. Even though his heroism was not just overlooked but actively downplayed, he handled it with tremendous dignity. This stands in stark contrast to Grigory Bulatov, who found it much harder to endure.
Unlike Koshkarbayev, Grigory Bulatov found it extremely difficult to cope with the injustice. He poured his feelings into lengthy letters to Koshkarbayev, expressing his frustrations and seeking support. After being demobilized in 1949, Bulatov returned to his hometown of Slobodsk in the Kirov region. He often recounted his wartime experiences and his act of heroism to the locals. Unfortunately, they were skeptical, mocked him, and even gave him the derisive nickname, Grishka Reichstag. In the Russian documentary Soldier and Marshal, we found footage of Bulatov's wife, Rima, and his friends reflecting on his struggles. And sometimes he'd drink and end up in tears, lamenting, "They don't value me."
Even if he tried to prove his point, no one believed him. They just kept calling him Grishka Reichstag.
The film captures it all. The flag draped over his shoulder, Grisha struggling like a country boy to carry it. Then there's that iconic shot of him planting the flag. His face showing frustration, but the voiceover only mentions Kantaria and Yegorov, claiming they raised the victory banner over the Reichstag. It's enough to make you want to throw a grenade at the TV. Here's what he wrote to Koshkarbayev in his letters.
They gave us a better apartment, but it's still not fully furnished. I'm working as a mechanic at a plywood factory. Why has everyone forgotten about us? Meanwhile, Kantaria and Yegorov are getting all the glory and recognition at our expense.
The last letter was written on January 12, 1973.
It's been 6 months since I got out of prison. My life isn't exactly shining. There's no much to brag about. I've stopped relying on anyone. When we were needed, they made many promises, but we were young and easily fooled. You know how it turned out. The imposters got what was coming to them. My grudge will last a lifetime. Please, don't waste your time on me. I think it's all pointless, and I'm just fed up.
In 1973, Grigory Bulatov, the man who raised the victory banner over the Reichstag, took his own life. As for Koshkarbayev, he chronicled his heroic acts and wartime experiences in his autobiographical books, The Victory Banner and Assault. In 1999, the first president of Kazakhstan awarded him the title of People's Hero of Kazakhstan, Khalik Kahramanı. His descendants proudly uphold the legacy of their distinguished ancestor and the story of his bravery.
Для меня это большая ответственность в жизни — носить эту фамилию. И
For me, carrying this surname and preserving its history is a great responsibility. Now that I have a son who also bears the name Koshkarbayev, there's a special reverence for it within our family. It truly is an honor to uphold and pass on this name.
Я думаю, что столько лет прошло, уже даже Советского Союза нет, больше 30 лет.
Even after more than 30 years since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the debate over who truly planted the victory banner on the Reichstag resurfaces every May the 9th. Each year, various claims and interpretations come to light, with people revisiting the story and presenting their own versions. This highlights how central the victory remains as a historical event. The victory in such a brutal conflict, where over 27 million Soviet citizens perished, is monumental. Figures like Koshkarbayev are symbols from which new generations in Kazakhstan can draw inspiration. His role in this heroic act unites many, and the story of the victory banner is remembered by everyone across the former Soviet Union. It's a remarkable feat that while many may not remember all the details of military operations, the victory banner is a universally recognized symbol.
Ну, подвиг совершается всегда не за награду.
Heroic deeds are never performed with the expectation of rewards. That's a fundamental truth. True heroism is selfless, driven by inspiration and a higher purpose, and it often means overcoming one's own instinct for self-preservation. That's the first point. The second point, from a historian's perspective, is that everything we do, say or write becomes part of history. Eventually, the truth will emerge. That's why I always advise people to be mindful of their actions, words, and writings. History has a way of revealing every hidden truth, and nothing remains concealed forever. Whether someone is unjustly ignored or wrongly celebrated, the truth will come to light in time.
Обделен наградой, либо несправедливо награжден, вот рано или поздно общество об этом узнает.
Бесстрашный сын казахского народа Рахимжан Koshkarbayev прожил 64 года. Его уважали и ценили все, кто знал.
Rakhimzhan Koshkarbayev, the fearless son of the Kazakh people, lived for 64 years and was deeply respected by all who knew him. Yet he became a casualty of the Soviet ideological machinery, which often devalued both people and their achievements to serve political ends. Despite this grave injustice, he did not succumb to despair or bitterness. He upheld his dignity and continued his path with pride, as any true warrior would. His example teaches us how to remain true to our principles in any political climate. In his later years, he must have hoped that eventually the truth would emerge and be acknowledged. And it has. Today, every Kazakh knows and proudly asserts that it was Rakhimzhan Koshkarbayev who planted the victory banner on the Reichstag. He was not the son of an enemy of the people, but a proud son of his father, his land, and his country.
Своей земли, своей отчизны.